The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Willow Creek's dusty Main Street, as Zara James clutched her thin shawl tightly around her trembling shoulders. October 1876 had brought an early chill to Colorado territory, and the flimsy costume beneath the shawl offered no protection against the bite of the wind or the cruelty awaiting her inside the Midnight Saloon. "You're late again, girl," growled Vernon Pike as he yanked her through the back entrance. His meaty fingers dug into her arm, sure to leave bruises by morning. "The men are getting restless. We got miners flush with payday money and they ain't spending it fast enough. Please, Mr. Pike," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the raucous piano and drunken laughter from the main room. "I can serve drinks instead tonight. My ankle is still." The slap came so quickly she barely saw it coming. Her cheek stung as Pike leaned in, his whiskey breath hot against her face. "You dance. That's what you're here for. That's what pays your daddy's debt." Tears stung Zara's eyes as she nodded. 6 months ago, her father's final gambling debt had fallen to her after consumption had taken him to his grave. Pike had offered her work at the saloon, making it sound respectable, serving drinks, perhaps some light cooking. But respectability wasn't what drew patrons to the Midnight. "Get changed," Pike ordered, shoving her toward the cramped storage room that doubled as the dancers' dressing area. "And remember to smile this time. Nobody tosses coins to a girl who looks like she's at a funeral." Inside the room, Maggie Nelson, one of the older dancers, gave Zara a sympathetic glance. At 30, Maggie's days of prime stage time were fading, but she'd survived a decade in places like the Midnight. "Here, honey," Maggie said, offering a small flask. "Just a sip, takes the edge off." Zara shook her head. "I need to stay clear-headed." "Suit yourself," Maggie sighed. "Just remember to look at the lantern on the back wall. Don't make eye contact with the men. It only encourages them to think they own you." 20 minutes later, Zara stood behind the threadbare curtain in a costume that revealed more than it concealed, a gaudy red corset that pinched her waist and pushed up her modest bust, paired with a skirt short enough to display her ankles and calves. Her long chestnut hair hung loose around her shoulders, the only part of her appearance that still felt like her own. Pike's voice boomed through the saloon. "Gents, loosen those purses. For your pleasure, the desert flower of the West, Miss Zara." The curtain jerked open, and the smoky room erupted in whoops and hollers. The pianist launched into a lively tune as Zara forced her feet to move. Each step on her injured ankle sent pain shooting up her leg, but she'd learned to mask it with what passed for a smile. She twirled and swayed, executing the suggestive dance Pike had taught her, while men leered and shouted crude comments. The wooden stage was scattered with coins, and Pike stood at the edge, ensuring none went uncollected. This was her life now, dancing for strangers' amusement, praying each night would bring enough coins to reduce her father's debt. Through the haze of smoke, Zara noticed a tall figure standing near the bar. Unlike the miners and ranch hands who pressed close to the stage, this man kept his distance. His face was partially obscured by the brim of a dark hat, but she could feel his eyes on her, not leering but watching with an intensity that made her miss a step. Pike noticed her falter and hissed, "Keep moving, girl." Zara spun faster, ignoring the pain in her ankle, but when she glanced back toward the bar, the stranger was gone. Disappointment washed over her, though she couldn't say why. Just another drifter passing through Willow Creek, she told herself. As the dance progressed, the crowd grew rowdier. A bearded miner climbed onto the stage, reaching for her arm. "Give us a closer look, darlin'," he slurred, attempting to pull her toward him. Zara tried to twist away, but her injured ankle gave out. She stumbled backward as the man lunged forward. Before he could touch her again, a powerful arm shot out from the side of the stage, catching the miner by his collar and yanking him back with such force that he toppled off the edge. In the chaos that followed, Zara found herself facing the stranger from the bar. Up close, she could see his features clearly, strong jawline peppered with stubble, eyes the color of a summer storm, and a determined set to his mouth. In one fluid motion, he shrugged off his long leather duster and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering her exposed skin from the crowd's hungry eyes. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and steady, meant for her ears alone. "You don't have to do this." Pike charged forward, his face mottled with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing? That girl belongs to me." The stranger turned, positioning himself between Zara and Pike. "No person belongs to another, mister. She owes a debt," Pike spat. "Unless you're planning to pay it, back away from my property." The saloon had gone eerily quiet. Even the piano player had stopped, his hands hovering over the keys. "How much?" the stranger asked, never taking his eyes off Pike. "What? The debt? How much?" Pike's eyes narrowed. $200, plus interest." The stranger reached inside his vest and pulled out a leather wallet. Without hesitation, he counted out bills and tossed them at Pike's feet. $300. That covers her debt and your interest. The lady is leaving with me." Murmurs swept through the crowd as Pike stared at the money, greed battling with pride on his face. Finally, he bent to collect the bills. "Fine. Take the ungrateful little, choose your next words carefully," the stranger cut in, his hand moving slightly toward his holster. Pike fell silent, clutching his payment. The stranger turned back to Zara, his expression softening. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her ankle throbbed mercilessly. "I need to get my things. I'll wait." Maggie helped her gather her meager possessions: a faded dress, a photograph of her parents, a small Bible, and a hairbrush with missing bristles. They fit easily into a worn carpet bag. "Who is he?" Maggie whispered, glancing toward the main room where the stranger waited. "I don't know," Zara admitted. "Be careful," Maggie warned, squeezing her hand. "Men don't part with money like that without expecting something in return." The thought had already occurred to Zara, sending ice through her veins. Had she merely traded one form of servitude for another? But when she emerged from the back room, the stranger's respectful distance and the genuine concern in his eyes eased her fears somewhat. Outside, the night had deepened, stars appearing like diamonds scattered across black velvet. The stranger guided her to a horse tethered outside the town's only hotel. "I've taken a room there," he said, gesturing to the building. "For you, I'll find other accommodations." Zara stared at him, bewildered. "You're giving me a room? But why? Who are you?" He removed his hat, revealing thick sandy hair that curled slightly at the edges. "Benjamin North. Most folks call me Ben. I rode in from Denver this afternoon." "I'm Zara James," she said, still clutching his coat around her. "But I imagine Pike told you that much when he announced me." Ben's mouth tightened. That wasn't an introduction. That was an auction. A shiver ran through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Why did you help me, Mr. North?" He was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the darkened street as if searching for words among the shadows. "Some things a man can't witness without acting. What they were doing to you in there." He shook his head. "No one deserves that." "The debt was real," Zara said quietly. A father's mistakes shouldn't condemn his daughter," Ben interrupted. "Whatever he owed, you've more than paid." Tears threatened to spill down Zara's cheeks. No one had spoken to her with such kindness since her father's death. "I don't know how I can repay you." "You don't need to," he said simply. "The room is paid for a week. That should give you time to decide what you want to do next. The stagecoach comes through on Thursdays if you're looking to leave Willow Creek." Zara clutched her carpet bag tighter. "And what about you? What brings you to this town?" A shadow passed across Ben's features. "Business. I'm tracking someone." "You're a lawman?" she asked, noticing for the first time the worn leather holster at his hip and the way his eyes continuously scanned their surroundings. "U.S. Marshal," he confirmed. "But that's not your concern. For now, you should rest." He helped her up the hotel steps, her ankle protesting with each movement. At the front desk, the clerk handed over a key without comment, though his curious gaze lingered on Zara's attire beneath the open coat. Outside room number 7, Ben handed her the key. "Lock the door behind you. I'll check on you tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Zara caught his arm. "Your coat, keep it," he said. "Good night, Miss James." Alone in the small but clean room, Zara sank onto the bed, still wrapped in Ben's coat. It smelled of leather, tobacco, and pine masculine scents that somehow made her feel safer than she had in months. She buried her face in the collar, allowing herself to cry for the first time since her father's funeral. Outside her window, Ben North crossed the street to the livery stable where he'd arranged to sleep. The Marshal badge weighed heavy in his pocket, but not as heavy as the knowledge that he'd just spent nearly half his reward money from his last capture to free a woman he'd never seen before tonight. His partner back in Denver would call him a fool, but Ben knew he'd make the same choice again. Some actions were beyond choice. They were simply what a man had to do to live with himself. He settled onto a pile of fresh hay, his Winchester rifle beside him, and tried not to think about Zara James's grateful eyes or the strange protectiveness he felt toward her. He had a job to do in Willow Creek tracking down Isaac Fleming, a murderer who'd escaped custody in Santa Fe and was rumored to be hiding in this area. He couldn't afford distractions, but as sleep claimed him, it was Zara's face, not Fleming's, that filled his mind. Morning arrived with golden shafts of sunlight cutting through the hotel room's thin curtains. Zara woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The unfamiliar softness beneath her was a real mattress, not the straw pallet in the room behind the Midnight's kitchen where she'd slept these past months. Reality returned in pieces: the dance, the miners grabbing hands, and Ben North wrapping his coat around her like armor. She sat up, wincing at her ankle's stiffness, and saw Ben's duster folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Despite her exhaustion, she'd had the presence of mind to remove it before sleeping. A knock at the door startled her. Limping across the room, she called out, "Who is it?" "Benjamin North, madam." Zara opened the door to find Ben standing in the hallway, a package in his hands and a respectful distance between them. He looked different in daylight, more weathered than she'd realized, with fine lines around his eyes suggesting he was in his early 30s. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and the badge pinned to his vest gleamed in the morning light. "I brought breakfast," he said, holding up the package, "and something else I thought you might need." Zara invited him in but left the door partially open, mindful of her reputation, what little remained of it. Ben set the package on the small table by the window and unwrapped it to reveal fresh biscuits, bacon, and a jar of preserves, along with a folded bundle of fabric. "The general store was just opening," he explained. "I guessed at the size, but Mrs. Hargrove said it could be altered if needed." Zara unfolded the bundle to find a simple blue calico dress, modest and practical, along with undergarments and a pair of sturdy boots. Heat rushed to her cheeks at the thought of him purchasing such personal items, but the practicality overcame her embarrassment. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've shown me more kindness in one night than I've known in months." Ben shifted uncomfortably at her gratitude. "You should eat while it's hot." They shared the meal in companionable silence. Zara couldn't remember the last time she'd had fresh bacon pike, had fed the girls whatever was cheapest, usually beans and day-old bread. "What will you do now?" Ben asked as she finished the last biscuit. Zara stared out the window at Willow Creek coming to life below. "I don't know. I have no family, no skills that would earn honest work." "That's not true," Ben said firmly. "Everyone has skills." She gave him a sad smile. "I can read and write passably well. My mother taught me before she died. I can cook simple meals. But who would hire Pike's Dancy Hall girl? You're more than what they called you," Ben said, his gray eyes intense. "Don't let them define you." His confidence in her, a stranger, was bewildering yet comforting. Zara found herself wanting to deserve his good opinion. "What about you? You said you're tracking someone." Ben nodded, suddenly all business. "A man named Isaac Fleming. Killed 3 people in New Mexico territory, including a woman and her young son. Word is he's hiding somewhere around Willow Creek." Zara frowned. "I haven't heard the name, but the midnight gets all sorts passing through. What does he look like?" "Tall, lean build. Dark hair, usually wears it long. Has a scar across his right cheek shaped like a crescent, about 40 years old." The description triggered something in Zara's memory. There was a man who matched that description in the saloon about 2 weeks ago. He stayed 3 nights, kept to himself mostly. Ben leaned forward, suddenly alert. "Did you hear where he was headed?" He mentioned something about the old Whitcomb mine to one of the other girls. Said there was easy money to be made there. The marshal stood, excitement evident in his posture. "The Whitcomb mine is about 10 miles north of here. Abandoned after a cave-in last year." "Be careful," Zara said, surprising herself with her concern for this man she barely knew. "If he's as dangerous as you say." Ben's expression softened. "I've been doing this for 7 years, Miss James. I'll be fine." He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the knob. "Would you do something for me?" "Of course. Stay in town until I return. It shouldn't be more than a day or 2. The request warmed her in unexpected ways. He wanted to know she'd be safe, that she'd still be here when he came back. "I'll be here." After Ben left, Zara changed into the new dress, marveling at the clean, crisp fabric against her skin. It fit surprisingly well, though it was a bit loose in the waist. She braided her hair and used the hotel's shared washroom to clean up properly, scrubbing away the last traces of makeup Pike had insisted she wear. The woman who stared back from the small mirror looked younger, more vulnerable, but somehow more herself than she had in months. She touched her reflection, tracing the outline of her face, and wondered if this was how Ben saw her. The thought of the marshal brought a flutter to her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. His kindness was extraordinary, but she reminded herself not to read too much into it. He was simply doing what he considered right, the same moral compass that made him chase dangerous criminals, likely compelled him to help a woman in distress. Still, as she left the hotel to explore the town in daylight for the first time in months, Zara found herself hoping he would return quickly and safely. Willow Creek looked different outside the walls of the Midnight Saloon. The main street boasted a general store, a small church, a telegraph office, and a restaurant that advertised home cooking. People nodded politely as she passed, not recognizing her without the garish makeup and revealing clothes. Inside the general store, Mrs. Hargrove greeted her warmly. "You must be the young lady Marshal North bought the dress for this morning. Fits nicely, I see." Zara tensed, waiting for judgment, but the older woman merely continued. "He mentioned you might be looking for work. Can you sew?" "Yes, madam. My mother taught me." Mrs. Hargrove nodded approvingly. "I could use help with alterations and mending. The miners are always tearing their clothes, and I can't keep up with the demand myself." By midday, Zara had secured not only employment but a small room behind the store in exchange for helping open and close the shop. Mrs. Hargrove didn't ask about her past, and Zara didn't offer details, grateful for the woman's discretion. That evening, as she arranged her few possessions in her new room, Zara heard commotion on the street. Looking out the window, she saw Ben North riding into town, another horse in tow. Across the second horse's saddle was a body bound and apparently unconscious. Without thinking, Zara hurried outside. A crowd had gathered as Ben delivered his prisoner to the town's small jail. When he emerged from the building, his eyes immediately found hers among the onlookers. He looked tired, with a cut above his eyebrow and dust coating his clothes, but otherwise unharmed. "You caught him," she said when he approached. Ben nodded. "Thanks to your information about the Whitcomb mine, Fleming was holed up in one of the abandoned buildings nearby." "You're hurt," Zara observed, gesturing to the cut on his face. "It's nothing. He didn't come quietly." Ben's gaze swept over her new surroundings. "You've been busy." "Mrs. Hargrove offered me work and a place to stay," she explained. "I start tomorrow." Something like approval warmed his eyes. "That's good. I'm glad." They stood in awkward silence, neither sure what came next. Ben had fulfilled his duty by capturing Fleming, and Zara was no longer in need of rescue, yet neither seemed eager to part ways. "I should clean up," Ben finally said. "Fleming needs to be transported to Denver for trial. I'll be leaving with him on tomorrow's stage." Disappointment settled in Zara's chest. "So soon?" "Duty calls," he said, though he didn't sound pleased about it. "Would you," he cleared his throat, "would you have dinner with me tonight?" "To celebrate catching Fleming," Zara smiled, warmth spreading through her. "I'd like that very much." The town's small restaurant was quiet that evening, most patrons having finished their meals earlier. Ben and Zara sat at a corner table, sharing a simple but hearty supper of beef stew and fresh bread. "Tell me about yourself," Zara said, genuinely curious about the man who had changed her life so dramatically in less than a day. Ben took a sip of coffee before answering. "Not much to tell. Grew up in Pennsylvania. My father was a blacksmith. After the war, I headed west looking for something different, ended up with a badge." "You fought in the war?" Zara asked, noting he would have been young but old enough. He nodded. "Union Army. Enlisted at 18, saw things no young man should see. Came home different." The shadows in his eyes spoke of memories he preferred not to revisit. Zara understood she had her own dark places. "What about family?" she asked, changing the subject. "Is there a Mrs. North waiting for you somewhere?" Ben's mouth quirked up at one corner. "No, this job doesn't lend itself to settling down, always moving, always hunting the next fugitive." He studied her across the table. "What about you? Before the saloon, I mean." Zara traced the rim of her water glass with one finger. "I grew up in St. Louis. My mother died when I was 16, influenza. My father was a merchant, but his business failed after her death. He started gambling, thinking he could win enough to start over." She sighed. "He lost everything instead. When consumption took him 6 months ago, his debts transferred to me. Pike offered what seemed like honest work, but once I arrived in Willow Creek, the terms changed." "I'm sorry," Ben said quietly. "No one should have to endure what you did." "It wasn't all bad," Zara said, feeling a strange need to find something positive. "I met Maggie and the other girls. We looked after each other, and if I hadn't been at the Midnight, I wouldn't have seen Fleming or been able to help you find him." "Or met me," Ben added, his eyes holding hers. Heat crept up Zara's neck. "Or met you," she agreed softly. As they finished their meal, a comfortable silence fell between them. Zara found herself wishing the evening wouldn't end, that tomorrow's stagecoach would somehow be delayed, giving her more time with this quiet, honorable man who had rescued her without demanding anything in return. "I should escort you back to Mrs. Hargrove's," Ben said as they stepped outside into the cool night air. "You need rest before your first day of work." They walked slowly through the quiet streets, neither in a hurry to reach their destination. When they arrived at the back entrance to the general store, Ben removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Thank you for dinner," Zara said, reluctant to say goodbye. "Miss James." "Zara," Ben began, then hesitated. "I want you to know that what I did last night buying your debt from Pike, it doesn't obligate you to me in any way." "I know that," she said, touched by his concern for her independence. "Good." He nodded, still turning his hat. "Because I'd like to write to you, if that would be acceptable." "After I return to Denver," joy bubbled up inside her. "I'd like that very much, Marshal North." "Ben," he corrected, a smile softening his features. "If we're to be correspondents, I think first names are appropriate." "Ben," she repeated, enjoying the simplicity of it on her tongue. He reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch sent shivers down her spine. "I've known you less than a day," he murmured, "yet I find myself reluctant to leave." "Then don't," Zara whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. Ben's hand cupped her cheek. "I must. Fleming needs to face justice for what he's done. And after, he said, his voice deepening, "I would very much like to return to Willow Creek." In the silvery moonlight, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so tender, it brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't the demanding kiss of a man claiming a possession, but the respectful touch of someone who valued her choice to accept or reject his affection. When they parted, Zara kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling. "I will count the days," she promised. Ben left for Denver the next morning, the stagecoach carrying him and his prisoner away in a cloud of dust. Zara watched from the general store's porch, Mrs. Hargrove tactfully busying herself inside to give her new employee privacy. True to his word, Ben's first letter arrived 2 weeks later, carried by the westbound stage. Over the following months, their correspondence flourished. Ben wrote of his cases, the places he traveled, and his growing dissatisfaction with a life spent constantly on the move. Zara shared stories of her new life in Willow Creek, her growing friendship with Mrs. Hargrove, her improving sewing skills, and the way the town had gradually accepted her presence without judgment. Between letters, Zara threw herself into her work. Under Mrs. Hargrove's guidance, she learned to keep books, order inventory, and eventually create simple clothing patterns. When influenza swept through Willow Creek that winter, Zara helped nurse the sick, finally putting to rest any lingering whispers about her past. Ben visited whenever his duties brought him near Colorado territory. Each visit lasted a little longer than the previous one, and with each departure, the ache in Zara's heart grew stronger. 4 months after their first meeting, Ben arrived unannounced on a snowy February evening. Zara was closing the store when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to find him standing there, snowflakes melting on his broad shoulders, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Ben," she gasped, rushing around the counter. "I wasn't expecting you until spring." He caught her hands in his, cold from the winter air. "I couldn't wait that long." Mrs. Hargrove emerged from the back room, a knowing smile on her face. "Marshal North, what a pleasant surprise. I believe I forgot something at home. Zara, dear, would you mind closing up tonight?" Without waiting for an answer, the older woman donned her coat and slipped out, leaving them alone. "You're freezing," Zara observed, leading Ben toward the pot-bellied stove in the corner. "How long have you been traveling?" 3 days, he said, warming his hands over the stove. I resigned my position. Zara froze. You what? Ben turned to face her, determination written across his features. I'm done chasing other men across the territories. I've been offered a position as sheriff in Silver Gulch, about 20 miles from here. It's a growing town, needs law and order, but it would mean staying in one place. Hope bloomed in Zara's chest. You'd be nearby. That's the idea. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Zara James, I've spent my life believing I wasn't meant for roots or family. Then I walked into that saloon and saw you, and everything changed. Tears blurred Zara's vision as Ben dropped to one knee before her, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. I know it's fast, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. We've known each other only a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Zara. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Zara's heart felt too big for her chest, joy threatening to burst through her skin. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Ben slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and gathered her into his arms. His kiss was no longer tentative but passionate and certain, the kiss of a man who knew exactly what he wanted and had found it. That spring, they married in Willow Creek's small church. Mrs. Hargrove stood as Zara's witness, beaming proudly from the front pew. Even Maggie came, having finally saved enough to leave the midnight for a position as housekeeper in a respectable hotel in Denver. The Norths settled in Silver Gulch, where Ben's reputation as a fair but firm U.S. Marshal quickly earned him the town's respect. Zara opened a small dressmaking shop next to his office, and soon her designs were sought after by women throughout the county. A year after their wedding, as they sat on the porch of their modest home watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Ben draped his coat around Zara's shoulders, a gesture that never failed to remind them both of their first meeting. Cold? He asked, noting how she pulled the familiar leather close. Zara smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her slightly rounded belly. Just making sure both of us stay warm. Ben's eyes widened, joy and wonder washing over his features as understanding dawned. Both. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We'll be 3 come winter. He gathered her into his arms, burying his face in her hair as emotion overcame him. I never thought I could be this happy, he confessed. Zara thought back to the frightened girl forced to dance on a dirty stage for strangers' coins, and how a single act of kindness had changed everything. Neither did I, she whispered, but here we are. As twilight deepened around them, Ben and Zara North remained on their porch, his coat wrapped around them both. 2 souls who had found in each other not just love, but home.